These are the Minecraft things that are so small that you might have missed them. And hey, according to the YouTube Pope, no one's ever subscribed to the channel using the side of their finger. So if you want to change that, slide your side into that button below. It's free and it helps out a ton. Baby chickens are really small, but they aren't coded like they are. See, even though these mobs are less than a half a block in size, they still won't walk through half block tall spaces, meaning you don't have to worry about any of these mobs escaping through this slab, even if it doesn't make much sense. This may look like a doormat, and it is, but it also doubles as an effective way of keeping mobs out of your base. No joke, by just having this simple carpet laid out like so, we prevent most mobs from walking through too tall walkways. And since their pathfinding doesn't think that they can make it through, we can use this to keep certain mobs out or in a specific area that we want. And plus, having a couple of carpet pieces laying on your floor is a lot less distracting than having a fence or a guarded gate, meaning this works for both the form and the function. Item frames are great, but you should be cautious, because when you're decorating with these, it gets very easy to have too many, and then it starts to bog down your performance. I mean, keep in mind, these are counted as entities within the code, so every item frame that you're placing down to the game, that's basically as if you're placing down a whole bunch of new mobs. And considering how small these are, that's an easy fact to forget. I mean, this small eating area uses 16 item frames alone, so picture how many item frames you're using to line your whole storage system. You get the point. And honestly, I take that as a reason to use these as sparingly as possible, but that might just mean that whenever you do choose to use them, it'll be even more special. If you look closely, you'll notice that the chest that's inside of the chest bow isn't the same chest as the one that's inside of the minecart, but rather the chest texture that shows in the chest bow is 12 by 12 pixels, while the one in the actual block is 14 by 14. But I guess that just goes to show that those 2 extra pixels weren't all that necessary, because I didn't even notice. This fox is too small for its own good, and that becomes immediately apparent when you put it in water. It'll start drowning. And you can notice this when a baby fox tries to hunt a fish. It'll likely die before it even gets to the food. When barrels got added into Minecraft, they're kind of a status quo change. I mean, for so long, if you wanted to store your items, you had to do it in something that looked like this. But luckily for us, barrels look like a full block, meaning we can hide them in some pretty clever ways. And my personal favorite might just have to be putting an upside down barrel in between your floorboards. As you can see with these examples, we can tuck these away in some pretty inconspicuous places like underneath the bed or some other chests, and boom, you just can't even notice it. Meaning if you want a flush way to incorporate these into your build, you're going to be able to do such. You never want your house to feel too cramped, so to make every block count, why not opt for trap doors instead of blocks for your walls? Now, hear me out. The idea here is actually pretty solid, because while the regular blocks fill up the space, trapdoors take up just a fraction, which makes for a roomy inside without sacrificing the exterior. And as long as no hooligans come by and flip open the trapdoors, your base should be just as safe as it was before. When you give a mob the no AI tag, it doesn't move or follow the player, and that's true for all of them except the Guardian. Yeah, apparently since the Guardian's eye is coded as the head on the model, it'll still follow the player, even when it's supposed to have no AI. Steve and Alex have pretty basic animations, to say the least, but that's not to discount the subtle ones that Mojang has added in. As you'll see, there are now several hand animations for things like placing a boat, feeding pandas, and even breeding animals, which I think is worth noticing just to give props for the subtle changes, because otherwise they'd go underappreciated. Keeping your stuff safe in Minecraft is a key problem, and to help with that, it's usually a good idea to lock down your door in some way. But since an item frame combination or a carrot key are fairly standard by this point, it's worth getting creative. And luckily, the axolotl is our ticket for this. See, much like a rabbit-based detection system, if we hold a bucket of tropical fish within range of the axolotl, it'll move towards the pressure plate and trigger the redstone, allowing us to walk in, and the axolotl will walk back to the water to reset itself. And it's a much friendlier alternative to a pufferfish player detector, that's for sure. Well, there are many different ways in the game to hide a different chest item. As it turns out, if you just add 5 iron to the back of that in a crafting table, then all of a sudden you can make a pretty good hidden minecart chest. This new entity is way easier to push into corners, and you can definitely see that with this bookshelf. From a first glance, it's hard to notice anything, but as soon as we get closer, you'll see a bit of gray popping out, right click on that, and boom, all of your stuff's safe and clean. Which I think is pretty sweet, even if you only get 1 chest worth of storage here as opposed to the full double. Minecraft has its share of odd collisions, and while we've talked about this in the past with minecarts and such, a stranger example might come in the form of signs. Now, from the front, there doesn't seem to be much of a problem here, especially when you place it on the floor. But if we get a side view of this one placed on the wall, then we can actually see how the sign floats off of the block, which is odd, but at least the other 99% of the time, we can barely even notice this. Even though Minecraft is a sandbox, that doesn't stop the game from having unspoken rules. And if you ask me, some of those are just bizarre. Take this ladder for example. Now if we make a pathland underneath the wall and then place a ladder, you can see it works just fine. Though if we place the ladder above the grass and then try to make it into a path block, block, it's a no-go. And why that order exists, I've got no clue, but at least now we've got the proper arbitrary way to pull this off. What's the difference between this fence gate and this one that we have right here? Well, it's hard to notice, but when you place a fence gate next to a wall, it'll stoop down a little bit lower to match the height of the cobblestone wall. Okay, hear me out. Pufferfish have a lot more going on than you think. Well, sure, most of us might only care about these things for the water-breathing potions we brew. That's not the whole picture. Actually, that's about the only positive they offer up, because the rest of the time, they're a tool for evil. Don't believe me? Well, let's put that small hitbox to use, and I'll show you. By tucking a bunch of these poisonous pests underneath the trap door, we're fully capable of making a sneaky floor weapon. So if you want to keep some of those house guests from going out of line, then just throw a couple of these into the floor plan, and the message will be clear. Let's say you run a Minecraft farm, and while that's going well for you, you actually want to tuck away your prized golden hoe. Completely understandable, but when you're out there in the field, a chest looks pretty obvious. So instead, for any farmhands looking to keep their items safe, you actually might benefit from making a tilled soil trick. 99% of the time that you look at it, this dirt just looks like that, dirt. But as soon as you come through and use your hoe on that soil, then all of a sudden you're able to peek through that one little gap and then actually see your items. All it takes is a few jumps to cover up your tracks, and just like that, your crop cache is hidden away in a safe. When it comes to graphic design, it's always nice to have things line up, which is why this experience bar poses a bit of a problem. You see, in Bedrock Edition, the right side of the bar matches up with the hotbar's side, but the left doesn't. And sure, the game still plays the same whether it's off or not, but programs like Photoshop make lining things up so easy, so there's little reason not to do so. And now that I know it's there, it's gonna be tough to unsee. We've all seen chests by this point, and more accurately, we've seen what it looks like to have way too many chests. So this offers a way to make that chest monster of yours look a lot more presentable. Using the small space left between the chests, we can place item frames inside to make it seem as if they're glued together, which is a subtle fix, but it might be all you need to spruce up your standard storage. And hey, the item frame inside might also be a secret hiding spot, if you ever need that too. Baby zombies are annoying, but they used to be so much worse. Back in 2012, they would just chase you around forever, since no matter if it was day or night, they wouldn't burn in the sunlight. And in fact, that wouldn't be added in until 1.13, which was a lot of updates of having to deal with these ankle biters. And now thankfully they take after their parents and say their goodbyes when it's daytime. Usually, we change the color of beacon beams by using full glass blocks, which does work, but it's too expensive. Or rather, it's gonna look expensive when you compare it to this. See, by using colorful glass panes, we can get the same effect. And considering we get 16 glass panes per 6 glass blocks, that gives us 16 opportunities to change the color of your beacon instead of the 6 that we just had. And plus, you can even hide those stained glass panes inside of the beacon beam, which I'd argue looks even better than the original option, meaning that in more ways than one, this should be the way that you're dyeing your beacons going forward. While there's plenty of different creative things that you can make with soul sand, whether that's a slowness trap or a bubble elevator, this probably has to be my favorite. With a situation like this, if you ride a minecart over this, it actually snaps through the rail with you intact and still goes under the floor. Meaning that if you were to go to, say, a soul sand valley and set one of these up, all you gotta bring is the rails in your inventory and you're able to get a secret entrance right down to your hidden valuables. Is it weird? Absolutely, but I also think that's going to deter anyone from ever trying it, because really, who would think of this anyway? In recent updates, iron farms have never been easier to build. Since in the past we might have had to spend all the time to place down these doors in a specific way, now an entire iron farm could be kept to this small design. And as RaiseWorks shows off, we can build this iron farm design in 5 minutes, which that little of a time investment's able to get us 300 to 400 ingots per hour. So unless you start building with iron blocks, there's hardly even a need to go past this rate. It's really a no-brainer to have one of these in your world. As we've talked in the past, Minecraft sprites don't always line up with the game's world, and a long-standing example of that lies with our classic helmets. See, in the iron, gold, and diamond variants, there's no sign of a nose piece in the sprite, but when you put it on, those pixels just appear. And to be clear, I don't think anyone is against the idea of having a nose piece on the helmets, but maybe take a page out of the Netherite's book and update the sprites. And hey, since spectral arrows got fixed, maybe there is some hope. This design is cheap, and it's gonna save you a lot of time, because trying to convert all of your concrete powder by hand is a lengthy process. But with just a simple setup like this, we use barely any redstone and get a fully automatic farm. All we need to do is have an observer facing where we're going to place our concrete powder, and then have that redstone output power a dropper to give us more concrete powder, at which point we can offhand the concrete powder and put the pickaxe to mine in our primary hand. Though if you're going to try this, I want to make 2 notes. One is that the reason we use mangrove planks here is because wood can't be quickly broken by pickaxes, so there's no risk about accidentally breaking your wall when you're getting into an AFK session. And then 2 is that it's actually better to use efficiency 4 for a pickaxe instead of efficiency 5 1.5 in this scenario, because a faster efficiency could desync the observer and then the system would double trigger. But don't worry, being a little slower here is not going to be an issue, considering that overall, this will save you a bunch of time. When you're killing a bunch of mobs for XP, it's easy to lose focus, which is a shame, because when you take the time to actually get a breather, then you might just notice that these experience orbs have recently changed their look. As of recent versions, these bubbles are now transparent, which doesn't make too much of a difference since we still pick them up the same way, but hey, now you know. You know, some say it's a small world, but I think this might be smaller than what they had in mind. Though with a cartography table, it's much easier to have a globe in your house. And all you need to do that is some dark oak to go around. That way, the table itself can fade into the background blocks and let that globe really shine. And even though it doesn't spin very well, it does make for unique decoration. So without custom player heads in survival, this is the closest we've got for that. Now, I'll admit, sometimes Mojang makes a change that I can't wrap my head around. And this time, that would have to be the redesigns to the campfire sprites, since now these are made to have a shorter flame than before, and that's it. And personally, I'd still prefer if they took after vanilla tweaks and made them animated instead. It doesn't matter how nice your build is, if it has a 2-block tall ceiling, no one's gonna want to come inside. Let's face it, 2-block tall ceilings are just annoying to get around. And without the ability to easily sprint jump between different places of the build, it's really gonna feel claustrophobic for anyone who comes inside. So if you ask me, 3 blocks tall should be at least the minimum. That way you'll have more room for everything you want to do, which is quite literally gonna be less of a pain in the head. As we all know, Minecraft's a 3D game, but that doesn't mean everything in the game is a 3D model. For instance, even though things like tools might look 3D when held in your hand, that just isn't so. But rather, the game stitches together these 2D textures into somewhat of a 3D model, which is interesting, but it does leave imperfections, mostly seen along the pixels on the side. And folks, it just takes one quick look at the Vanilla Tweaks texture pack to see that a stitch fix is possible, and hopefully we could see such in a new update. Alright, pop quiz. What mob is this? I'll give you a hint, it's not a silverfish, but actually, it's just an endermite. See, when the endermite was added in, it was just a purple version of the silverfish, before it eventually got this new smaller model that we see today. It doesn't take a lot of redstone know-how to understand a pressure plate, but while we're all familiar with these, this might catch you off guard. See, while it is true that both mobs and items can weigh down these things, an item frame is a rare sight. Though, surely enough, if you place one like so, we can overlap the hitboxes and effectively create a permanent switch on like so. And what's cool about that is that it opens up the door for a nearly invisible redstone signal, and that's what I'd highly recommend for keeping your redstone lamps lit on the lamppost. I mean, it certainly looks a lot better than a lever, that's for certain. Placing blocks on slabs sounds like a pipe dream. So, why does this work? Well, if you use the summon command to get yourself a falling block, you can make sure it lands right where you want it to be. And then, after typing the command to summon it into place, you'll have a permanent addition to your slab or stair shelf, which beats the alternative of it floating, just saying. A secret entrance is a great addition for your house, but with redstone in that, it could be an expensive one. Enter the painting. Now, I know paintings are the white bread of the secret entrance world, but this user had an idea on how to spice it up. And by adding simple things like trapdoor gaps, specific jumps, and slabs to crouch under, we can make this old favorite a lot more effective. And that way we make sure that this painting doesn't go to waste. And we do it all without needing to learn a full course on redstone. Even after a big overhaul like the 1.14 texture update, there's still plenty of tweaks to be made to Minecraft's design. So with each update, you're sure to see a couple of sprites get a subtle change. And here that lands to item frames, as now these will have a birch colored frame to match their in-world model. You don't have to look at Minecraft for too long to realize that some textures get reused in different spaces. And while from a game design standpoint that makes sense, what it can actually allow us to do is make some pretty great camouflage. Like take for instance putting a stone button on top of a stone block. Just like that, if someone's looking at this machine dead on, they're not really going to notice the extra depth there. Meaning if you tuck away a stone button inside of an actual cave system, then it's a pretty solid way to tuck away your items for a hidden switch. Just make sure you remember where you place this, because I can imagine this could be pretty easy to lose if you try to go back and find it. Building a timer with redstone is possible, but costly. But this solves that, since by using even less redstone and even more of a big brain play, we instead use cobwebs and an item to fall slowly through the cobwebs and then drop onto the pressure plate. And there you go, by the time it reaches the bottom, you'll have roughly a minute and 10 seconds passed. So considering that other 1-minute timers look like this, I think it's more than worth it to give this one a shot, especially when it's this simple to set up. When it was first added in, the Wither was actually much easier to fight, since if you were to catch the Wither inside of a minecart as it was charging up, you could interfere with its startup and it would only have as much health as it had before it went into the minecart. So if you did this correctly, you could end up fighting a Wither that only had 1/3 of its health. But that bug would get fixed in 1.5, which is unfortunate, but maybe don't tell Mojang about this even easier way to kill the Wither. We'll just keep that between us. Turtle eggs are stronger than you think, because even though these eggs can't support the weight of the player or other mobs, they can support lanterns that are either placed above or below them. But it's worth noting that the lantern does look look like it's floating in those cases, so maybe that's why they don't break. It was never there in the first place. On the second floor, we've got a beautiful hot tub, but on the ground floor, you're not gonna like it as much. Since the ugly truth is that only having a 1 block thick floor underneath a water or lava feature means that all we're gonna see from the bottom floor is a bunch of particles dripping down from the ceiling. I'd rather just make the floor too thick and not have to worry about it. Sometimes Mojang seems a bit indecisive on a certain change. Take Netherite leggings for example. Originally added in Snapshot 20W6A, their texture just changed 4 weeks later, only to change again in the post-release in 1.16.4. And I imagine there are other more important things to worry about than a pair of pants. While your valuable items in fire don't tend to mix, actually putting them in a campfire is a different story. Or rather, underneath the campfire. As you can see here, the only way we're able to access the items underneath is by extinguishing this campfire. When it's lit, you got no hope, but as soon as it's extinguished, you're able to go through the ashes and actually pick up your stuff. Now this is a very weird method, and frankly, I haven't seen it done too often. But look, if you want to go on that camping trip and keep the explorers from, well, exploring your items, this might be your best shot. Trapdoors are a solid way to come and go when it comes to a hidden base, but when used in the wrong spot, they do stick out, like a lot, which is why this big drip leaf might be a better alternative. See, drip leaf placed like so forces us to crawl when it pops back up, which means it works as an automatic trapdoor of sorts to allow us to enter our secret stash. And hey, since these can be waterlogged as well, they'll look even less noticeable in a local pond, letting us swim to safety without any of the complicated redstone or trapdoor eyesores. Baby zombies are already annoying enough to fight, but that annoyingness gets so much worse when you fight these outside. Since with an incredibly small hitbox, they can sneak in just right into a blade of grass. And now you're hitting the shrubs instead of hitting them. And to make matters worse, they can still hit you, even when they're in the grass. And honestly, I like Simply Sark's solution for this. Let a sword be able to swipe through certain hitboxes like this. I'm not trying to do spring cleaning while I'm trying to save my life. Accidentally crafting something is a bad time that we've all been through, because when you mistakenly craft another chest plate for your friend, that's a lot of value that you just washed down the drain. Now sure, you could smelt it in your furnace for a return, but folks, that's a ripoff in its own way. A full durability iron or gold chest plate, which costs 72 nuggets to craft, reduces down to only 1 in a furnace. And I'm familiar with a margin of error, but that just seems ridiculous. And it's definitely not worth the attempt. Trapdoors are a common decoration block, which lucky for us means that there's plenty of these tiny crawl spaces that we can get into. Like take this house for example. By flipping open some of the spruce trapdoors in the pillars, we can tuck ourselves away from any passerby, even if it's their house. Or if they happen to use trapdoors in their floor design, then even better, you can hide into that too. And even if your friend doesn't have trapdoors in their base, it would look better if they did. So I'm sure if you added some of these in to help them decorate, they'd be appreciative and none the wiser that you're actually using it as a new hiding spot. When you're building, sometimes it can be frustrating when blocks don't behave how you'd expect, which is why it's nice that recent versions have glass panes and iron bars lining up properly with the walls. Before, if you looked at something like this, it's just not what you would want for the structure. So a subtle change, but a treat to the eyes nonetheless. Before the 1.8 update, we were able to use soul sand and other blocks that were slightly smaller than a full block hitbox to make these one-way doorways. Since if you walk through the archway like so, you could exit, but you couldn't come back because you would just be hitting your head on that top block. I mean, I guess you could always break the block, but in theory it was a one-way doorway. Unlike in real life, in Minecraft, you're not safe under the covers. You're quite literally out in the open. But by opening up this trapdoor underneath my bed, that'll give us access to the secret minecart underneath. And then by having that minecart placed on top of an activator rail, we have a quick and easy way to get in and out of our secret base. And this works particularly well, especially because if you have a bed up top, it already looks like you have a base. And I doubt very many people are going to be checking underneath your beds for any kind of monsters. And then when you're ready to leave, use the same minecart and it'll shoot us right up top. When you place a log facing the wrong way, it's usually easy to tell that you messed up. But when you're using the 6-sided wood block, then it's a little bit more difficult. Because with this case, the texture matches on one face, but it doesn't on the other. And that's why when we look close at this building, it starts to look off, considering that some of the wooden blocks that we placed have the wrong orientation. So the next time that you're building out your log cabin, keep in mind that it's not just about the amount of wood that you have, but how you use it. Now, this won't be a surprise, but an exploding creeper is not a welcome sight. Though, when you're at this point and the monster's already primed, how do we deal with it? Well, it might seem pointless, but the solution actually hinges around placing a block between your feet and the creepers, since the way that Minecraft calculates explosion damage is based off a ray cast between the source and the bottom of the player's hitbox. Meaning if we have a block to, well, block the oncoming damage, that will keep us virtually unscathed by the blow. And in my eyes, that's not too shabby for just a measly piece of cobblestone. When you're inside, this elevator feels like it could go on forever. And apparently that's more than true, since what's happening here is that when we press this button, it isn't the floor that's going up through the elevator, but rather the walls that are coming down. Sure enough, as this user shows off, with a little bit of command block trickery and some distinct patterns, we can make it seem as if we're for constantly going up this elevator shaft. But when you step outside, it turns out that nothing's actually moving. And while this illusion only really works if you're standing on the inside, it is still pretty cool to watch from the outside as well, almost like a barbershop pole illusion. Keeping your animals in the pen can be a real pain, so to cut back on materials and still keep them in place, try this pattern. Apparently, when you place down fence posts diagonally, it still keeps the animals in. This is because the animals are registered to be 1 block wide, but using them diagonally goes less than that space, which will prevent our animal friends from leaving. But if you build this, just keep in mind, the babies are still able to escape. So if you do this, just make sure to look out for the little rascals. With a minecart, a powered rail, and a pressure plate like so, we can follow this user's design to get the smallest 1-second clock, which is pretty cool considering how simple the redstone is to set up. And while it might make plenty of noise as it clicks back and forth, literally doing it every second, it's hard to argue with how concise this is. And following this common suggestion, you could just tuck this into the background and have a great bit of sound design for your next grandfather clock. In vanilla Minecraft, it's entirely possible to have a candle that's lit on fire even when it's underwater. And with the NBT tags like so, we can summon in that candle. Or if you're in Java, just use a debug stick like so. From the front, this signpost looks fine, but once we move over to the side, then the physics start to get a bit wonky. Unfortunately, the game's coded in such a way where item frames will float a little bit off of certain blocks, those being fences, glass panes, and even chests if you look from the right angle. So if you ask me, it's worth building around this fact and considering ways that you can place these items so that there isn't an annoying gap that breaks the illusion. Or at the very least, just make sure that no one can walk over to the sides to see your problem. Okay, let's play a game of Spot the Difference. Looking at these two comparators, one 1.17 and the other 1.18, which is the recent version. Well, zoomed out like this, it's hard to tell, but with a closer look, now we can see that the powered comparator in 1.18 got some red pixels added to the texture. Because Minecraft textures are 16 by 16, that no doubt means that you're gonna get some textures that are just off center. Take a look at the command block for instance. You got one less pixel on this side of the button deck than you do on this side, which can be mildly infuriating if you stare at it for too long. Oh, not to mention that some blocks like bricks have top textures that don't align well with their sides, making this whole thing a logical mess. Beds are a staple of the game, and they won't be going away anytime soon, though a little variety would be nice. So, what about a sleeping bag? Well, we can pull this off by solely placing slabs around the rim of the bed, which is super easy and it doesn't require a lot of material. And while I'm not saying that this is going to work out if you place it in a castle, it might fit in for a temporary base in the mines. But for any Bedrock players, beware, because you might not be able to respawn on top of the bed like we can in Java. Using blocks like stairs in your paths can be a great tool to use, but when you start to mix in bottom slabs as well, that's where the issue starts to arise, since anyone that's trying to walk over these is just going to be stopped by this annoying slump that happens in your block. So even though you're able to walk up this seamlessly, it's still not the greatest feeling to have to bob up and down while you're going over your path. So to help those weary travelers feel a little bit more steady, it's better to get the same kind of depth by using cobblestone stairs instead of a cobblestone slab. By this point, we're all familiar with the trick to turn your animals upside down by using a Dinnerbone name tag. But in this update, that's been tweaked a bit. And now when you feed your flipped over friends, they'll look up at the food instead of down like they used to, though the sheep still don't work. The ability to glaze terracotta opens up a bunch of new patterns to use in your builds. And while some of those are fun, others can be a headache. For an example, if we look at the light gray glazed terracotta block like this, it seems fine. But when you align it like so, the middle design doesn't line up across the blocks, which shuts down some really interesting floor patterns before they could even get off the ground. And maybe there is someday we'll see these centerpieces line up with one another. But until then, I'd rather just use a different block. You know this feeling all too well. You're searching in the caves, hours down in the dark, until finally, there it is, a spark of blue shining out from the cave. You go down to mine the diamond, only to find that it's just one ore in the vein. At that point, it even seems wrong to call it a vein at all. You don't even have another diamond to make yourself an enchantment table. At least that way, you'd be able to get fortune on the next diamonds that you find. All this is good for is a jukebox, which is to say, not good for anything. The trick to this secret entrance is that there isn't an entrance, but rather by aiming an ender pearl throw just the right way, we're able to teleport ourselves through a 1 block thick surface. And as you can see from the example, if we aim the ender pearl just right to where the wall meets the ground, then we can reliably clip through the wall and get over to our base. And while the ender pearl might hurt you a little bit to get inside, it's a lot better than having to stay out in the open to your enemies, so I'd rather take this damage than leave myself susceptible to more on the outside. With the texture updates of 1.14, our Minecraft wooden items started to look a lot different. Not the least of which having to do with the fact that we now had more wooden variations to play around with. But also, if you look at the items instead of the blocks placed within the actual world, you can see some differences start to pop out if you study it right. And I think it's here where you can see that it's actually quite a good redesign. I mean, look at the original spruce door texture to what we now have. One looks like programmer art, and the other one looks like something you'd put in an actual game. And I particularly like the differences that we got to the handles seen on the crimson and warped stem signs. Now they have a crimson and warped stem. But I will say, with all those details that got added, it's weird that that if you look at the item slot for the lapis lazuli that goes inside of the enchanting table, that actually became less detailed. I don't know. We could focus on the good redesigns at least for this one. You should never leave blocks missing in a place of a build where you won't see them, because even if you can't see it, you're still gonna know it's there. And you're definitely gonna hear it when those mobs start spawning in the gaps that you left. So to prevent that, it's worth filling in the gaps with something that you have on hand. Even if it's a cheaper block, that's at least gonna be better than having negative space in the open air. The building community is always looking for new ways to decorate, and since 1.16, campfires have gotten a lot more functionality there. Now, it's possible to place food on an unlit campfire, allowing for some kind of shelf design to use in your base. It seems pretty situational, but I guess it's nice to have. How did this zombie get so much bigger than this other one? Well, while I could answer that, the truth is, neither of them are. Or rather, they're both the same size. They're offset in just a way so that this one that's close to us looks bigger in the background, whereas the one that's further away seems to be smaller, even though it's not that closer up. And honestly, the whole way that this works is by using a tunnel like this. Since by having those flat geometric shapes, it makes it a lot harder for your eye to tell what's going on. So it just figures that by relative scale, that's how big one zombie is compared to the other. Even if, as we know, they're both the same size. Minecraft bricks have been around for a long time, and with that storied history, dating back to the early versions of Java Edition Classic, the texture has changed a bunch. And while it's clear to see that it's done a lot of growing up, the texture still has one issue to see. That is, if you look at the bottom of the block, you'll notice that some of the bricks don't line up. Rather, since the texture is repeated, there's not a logical consistency with the brick placement, which is a small complaint for sure, but mildly infuriating nonetheless. With the new mangrove trapdoor, we're able to make a pretty easy illusion, since if we just place one of these onto the front of a dispenser and flip it up like so, then from the right angle, it looks as if the eyes are following you along the camera. And there you have it, just like that, we've got a little watchful robot to keep an eye on you. Or if you want that same illusion, but you want a different eye color, then by just placing a fence post behind the trapdoor, you get the same effect, making this pretty diverse in how it works. With just a composter and a trapdoor, you have an easy way to hide yourself. But unfortunately, just like this, it's not the most effective. You can see yourself popping out of the sides. But nothing to worry about, because if you place blocks on the other sides of the composter like so, we're actually able to hide the player model from clipping out. It just might require some fine tweaking so that you actually get the right rotation. Oh, and while this seems hidden enough, if there's one last thing you should remember, it's that you need to hold sneak even while you're in this cramped spot. Otherwise, your name tag's gonna show up on top. I guess crawling isn't the same as sneaking. Go figure. Here's how you can use 8 trapdoors to completely ruin an ancient city. No joke, if we place down our trapdoors like this and then flip them up to have a fence, then once we get the warden to summon from a Skulk Catalyst, we can lead it inside and its pathfinding won't be able to find a way out of the blocks. At which point, it's trapped. Now we can move on to phase 2, which is that even though the warden spawned, it's not going to be able to attack us. So we can use that as safety and then go and destroy the other parts of the ancient city, including the Skulk Catalyst that originally spawned that warden. And then eventually the warden will despawn and we'll be able to explore the rest of this ancient city without worrying about hearing this ever again. And trust me, that's a weird weight off your shoulders. Why is this villager riding a chicken? Well, if the baby zombie that happens to be on a chicken jockey is a zombie villager, then when you cure it, it'll become a villager again, but it won't leave the chickens back. Meaning that if you cure this diamond armor zombie villager chicken jockey, you'll have the true rarest mob in Minecraft. But even then, you still won't be able to take it to the nether, since spider jockeys nor chicken jockeys are able to go through the portal. Picture this. It's the start of a new world, we're raiding a village with a friend, they go to kill the iron golem for some early ingots, but as they build 3 blocks tall to escape, we accidentally place a brick right here so that the golem can hit them. They suffer the consequences, and now we can grab the iron instead. Let's be honest, no one likes waiting for crops to grow, and sometimes that waiting game can feel like forever. But in this case, it's actually true. See, while our friend wasn't looking, we snuck in and placed string tripwire along the top of their bamboo and sugarcane, which when standing back here is an almost imperceptible change, but it means that the crops cannot grow past that point. Meaning if you do this inside the mechanics of a redstone farm, they'll be totally confused as to why it stopped working. This path looks great, but none of my friends want to walk on it, because when you use pressure plates as the decorations on a path, all anyone's gonna remember is the clicking noise every time that they walk over it. And frankly, the only reason I could think to do one of these is so that you could sneak a trap into your path. Other than that, it's just gonna put everyone on edge, and that's not exactly what I think of when I'm talking about a leisurely stroll. Here we've set up a beautiful table, and we've even got a couple of plates on top for food, but that's all gonna become an issue as soon as someone, or something, steps on top. Since if we make the mistake to accidentally place buttons or pressure plates next to our trapdoors, then all it'll take is another player or entity to press that button, and the whole illusion's gonna break. So while each of these can make for great decoration blocks by themselves, it's when you start to mix them together that you become more of a mumbo-jumbo instead of agreeing. This is the deadliest entity in Minecraft, but not by itself. But rather, if you were to get more than 24 of these put into the same spot, then our friends can have to deal with something called entity cramming, which is is, when the game thinks there's a certain number of mobs in the same spot, to avoid overloading on lag, they'll quickly start applying steady damage to the player. And by placing a honey block near the bottom, we make it even harder for them to escape once they fall in. But hey, at least they won't die alone. As it turns out, texture packs aren't the only place you can add animated textures to Minecraft. As you can see right here, if we split this map up into 4 quadrants and then play a simple 4-frame animation, then all we gotta do is rotate it, and there you go, it's animated. Sure, it's very silly, and it's probably not the most practical form of animation, but personally this takes me back to messing around with flipbooks as a kid. And when you see some of the examples that you can do when playing around with this, it's definitely worth a shot if you got the time. And if you don't want to spend the time slaving away at animation, I guess you could just make a 4-panel comic. Before Tallgrass made it into Minecraft, we had something called Wildgrass, which was a mod that added on an extra layer of grass on top of our regular grass to create a kind of pseudo tall grass. Though when we eventually did get Tallgrass into Minecraft, it was still significantly taller than the Wildgrass mod, which I guess is why it's not called Tall Wildgrass, huh? Before we got the update Aquatic in 1.13, the ocean biome looked extremely dark. And in fact, even if you placed glowstone down there, that would only light up about 5 blocks around it. But nowadays, we've got things like sea lanterns and coral reefs to finally light up the abyss, which is nice, but that update also added in the drowned mobs, so you get what you get, I guess. The carpets in Minecraft leave a lot to be desired. I mean, when you look at them, they're all one single color. It can kind of get old quick. So if you're trying to find a better rug for your house, then actually putting together maps and item frames is a pretty cool thing to walk on. For one, it gives you a lot more of a design to work with, especially since with this, you can add so many minute details that are just not possible with the standard variant. But really, what we're going for here is the illusion. If you ask me, it sells it pretty well. And it'll definitely impress some of your guests when they walk through and see that brand new welcome mat right on the floor for them. Did you know Mojang made it so creepers can't explode at all? It's really no joke. We're just gonna have to go up to the build limit to test it out. Since in current versions of the game, if you were to get a creeper or an exploding TNT block up at Y level 320, then at that build height, they're not able to destroy any blocks. And the reason for that is that when the game checks to see if the block has the right resistance, it just returns null. After all, you're not supposed to be able to place blocks up here, so why should it explode? And that means all explosion spread is nullified as well. If your friend uses any cobblestone in their paths, then this is the perfect way to make them lose their sanity. You see, by setting up a cobblestone generator with pistons right underneath one cobblestone block, then after every so interval, it'll pop up a new cobblestone block out of the floor, meaning they'll walk by, get confused, and break it, only to find the same block is back the next morning. And since most of the time they'll just break the top block and not look beneath, this prank is great for causing long-term stress to your poor pal. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?